So a lot of you guys were asking me to teach not only photography but also the settings you see in your DSLR or your mirrorless cameras and even in your smartphone's pro mode in camera app. So today we will be doing just that. Now there are a lot of things to learn in photography. Even I am learning each and every day. And as they say, photography is an art which is easy to get into, but it takes a lifetime to master it. Well, the first and most basic thing we need to understand is what we call an exposure triangle. It is essential to take care of your exposure, which is the amount of light when you take a photo, and you need to understand your exposure triangle well enough to expose your photo the right way each and every time. On the three ends of this triangle are aperture, ISO and shutter speed. Firstly, let's talk about shutter speed. So shutter speed is basically how fast your shutter opens and closes when you take a photo. Now as you increase your shutter speed, you reduce the amount of light reaching your camera's sensor and vice versa. Now you can use shutter speed to your advantage in several different ways. Firstly, if your subject is moving constantly and you want to capture its image without any motion blur, you can increase your shutter speed, allowing you to present your subject in a very unique way. You can also decrease your shutter speed to smooth out certain parts of your photo like a light streak or a waterfall, and this technique is called long exposure photography. This technique is also used to capture subjects in an area having very low light like in astrophotography. Now this is where aperture dives in. So aperture or f-stop is the amount of opening of your lens. The lower the f-stop, the more wider the lens opens and more light reaches your sensor. Now a wider aperture not only brings in more light to your sensor, but it also gives you what we call a shallower depth of field, or we can say a blurred out background, which we all love in our portraits. Now this doesn't mean that we have to keep our aperture at the widest possible every time we take a photo. When doing landscape photography, it is recommended that we increase our f-stop so that our photo is much sharper than before. Now lenses that can open wide like an f1.4 lens are usually referred to as fast lenses, as letting more light in, they allow you to shoot at much faster shutter speeds, reducing chances of blurry subject. Now you know what your shutter speed is and what your aperture is, so let me tell you what is your ISO. So ISO is basically the sensitivity of your camera sensor towards light. You can think of it like an artificial light. It comes in handy when you are shooting in low light situations. Now you have your aperture wide open and you have set your shutter speed to what you want, but you still can't get well exposed photo, and at this time you need to increase your ISO. Now you might think why we need to care about our aperture and shutter speed when we can easily expose our photo using just our ISO. Well, the thing is, as you increase your ISO more and more, you add up more and more noise to your photo. So you want to use your ISO as less as possible. Now this was only the first video regarding basics of photography, and there is a lot more to learn about in future videos. Until then, practice your exposure triangle well and use it every time you take a photo. So guys, that is it. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, so please smash that like and subscribe button and follow me on other social media platforms, where I'm also very active these days. Keep supporting the channel and help it reach 1000 subscribers. Until then, I will catch you guys in my next video.